The first time I realized something was terribly wrong. I was sitting in a plastic chair that squeaked every time I shifted my weight, the kind of chair that's been bolted to the floor since the Reagan administration. Outside, autumn leaves swirled in lazy circles across the parking lot of Oak Haven Gardens Senior Living. But inside, everything was hushed. The fluorescent lights hummed, the linoleum reflected every footprint, and the air carried that peculiar nursing home perfume. Lavender soap, overcooked carrots, and something faintly antiseptic, like a memory trying not to decay. My grandfather, Papa Leo, as I'd called him since I could talk, reached across the small table between us. His hand was thinner than I remembered, the skin papery and threaded with blue veins, but his grip was still firm. He smiled. Not the vague, drifting smile of someone lost in dementia, but the one I knew, eyes crinkled at the corners, warm, deliberate. "How's the apartment?" he asked, voice soft but clear. "You always loved that view." I froze. The apartment. I hadn't lived in an apartment in years. I'd been renting a tiny one-bedroom above a bakery in the city for the past 6 months, yes, but Papa hadn't visited me there, hadn't even known the address. And he hadn't been with it enough to remember street names, let alone floor plans, since his second stroke in March. For months, our conversations had circled around familiar ground. "Do you remember the dog we had? Was your mother ever good at baking?" Safe, looping questions that required no new information. But this was specific. The apartment, that view. I stared at him, trying to read his face for confusion, for a flicker of the disorientation that usually clouded his eyes. But there was none. He was looking right at me, expectant, as if waiting for an update on my morning commute or the leaky faucet I'd complained about last Christmas. It's okay, Papa," I said carefully, buying time. "The view's nice, lots of trees." He nodded slowly, satisfied, and patted my hand. "Good, that's good. You deserve peace." Then he leaned back, his gaze drifting toward the window, and just like that, the clarity receded. His shoulders slumped slightly, and he began humming an old hymn, one he used to sing while fixing his truck. The moment was over. But I couldn't let it go. On the drive home, his words played on a loop in my head. The apartment, that view, not asterisk and asterisk apartment, the asterisk apartment, as if we'd discussed it before, as if it meant something. That night, I dug through the box of his things my aunt had given me after the family meeting, the one where they'd decided he needed full-time care, and that someone had to handle his finances. I'd taken only his Bible, his pocket watch, and a few old photos, not wanting to seem greedy. But now, I opened the Bible again, running my fingers along the worn leather spine. And there it was. Tucked between Psalms and Proverbs, folded twice and secured with a paperclip. A deed. Not to the house he'd lived in for 42 years, the one my aunt had already put on the market. No, this was for a unit at 1427 Maple Lane, apartment 3B, purchased in cash. October 12, 2018. Grantee, Maya Elena Ruiz asterisk, my full name, spelled correctly with my middle name that no one but him ever used. My hands started shaking. I hadn't known this place existed. I'd never signed a lease, never seen the building, never even driven down that street. But according to this document, it was mine, or it was meant to be. I scrolled through property records online until 2 a.m., heart pounding. The apartment was real, paid off. No mortgage. Utilities registered under M. Ruiz. And the deed included a transfer on death clause, so it would pass directly to me without probate. But here, what chilled me? The county registry showed a second filing, dated June 2022, signed only months after his diagnosis worsened. A revocation of transfer on death deed, claiming Papa Leo was of unsound mind when he filed the original, and it bore his signature. Except, I'd seen that signature before. On birthday cards, on grocery lists, on the back of family photos. And this one? Too steady, too round, missing the sharp upward flick he always gave the tail of his L. My aunt had been his only regular visitor during that time. She brought him cookies, held his hand, posted photos on Facebook with captions like, "Still the sweetest man, even in silence." And while the world saw a devoted niece, I now saw something else. A woman who'd watched him fade and decided to erase a gift he'd given me while he could still remember my name. I didn't cry that night. I printed the deed. I called the building manager. I made a folder on my desktop labeled Maple Lane, and I started taking notes. Because Papa Leo hadn't been confused when he asked about the apartment. He'd been trying to tell me it was still mine. And I was going to prove it. I didn't press record right away. I sat in the dark of my bedroom, the glow of my laptop screen the only light, my fingers hovering over the trackpad like I was afraid the moment might shatter if I touched it. Outside, rain tapped against the window, soft, insistent, like someone knocking politely on the wrong door. I just finished watching the video I'd recorded the night before. Me, sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding Papa Leo's deed like it was a live thing, whispering to the camera like I was confessing to a priest. I hadn't meant to record it. I didn't even know I'd hit record. But there it was. My voice, thin and raw, saying, asterisk, he asked me about the apartment. I didn't know there was one. And now I think someone used his silence to steal it. I stared at the playback for 10 minutes. Didn't cry, didn't speak. Just watched the way my hands trembled when I turned the page. The way I kept glancing over my shoulder, like someone might walk in and take it away. Then I opened YouTube. I didn't write a title, didn't plan a thumbnail, didn't script a hook. I just clicked upload and let the video sit in draft mode for 3 hours while I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I was making a mistake. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about being believed. I'd spent my whole life being the quiet one, the girl who didn't argue, who nodded when people said, "You're too sensitive," who smiled when my aunt told me, "You don't understand how hard it is to manage these things," who let go of my grandmother's china because it's just stuff, and didn't say a word when my mom said, "Maybe you should just let it go." But this wasn't stuff. This was the one thing Papa Leo had ever done that was entirely, fiercely, unconditionally for me. And if I didn't say something now, if I didn't make it visible, then his last act of love would vanish like smoke. So I typed the first line of my description. Have you ever been lied to by someone who held your hand while they stole from you? I didn't ask for likes, didn't beg for shares, didn't say please subscribe. I didn't even say watch until the end. I just asked people to share their stories. If you've ever had someone you loved use your trust to take something that wasn't theirs, whether it was money, a home, a name, or your peace, tell me in the comments. I'm not here to be right. I'm here to be heard. I hit publish. Then I sat there, heart pounding, and waited. The first comment came in 7 minutes. My grandma signed over her house to my uncle while she was on pain meds. I found the deed in her Bible, too. I didn't speak up for 2 years. Then another. My dad told me he'd left me his fishing cabin. He didn't. My sister forged his signature. I cried for a week after I found out. I still don't know if I should go to court. A third. I'm 47. My mother gave my brother her house, said I didn't need it. I didn't say anything. Now she's in hospice and he won't let me visit. I'm so tired of being the good daughter. I read them all, out loud in the dark. By 3 a.m., there were 47 comments. By noon, 1,200. By the time I woke up, my phone was buzzing nonstop. DMs from strangers, emails from estate lawyers, a message from a woman in Ohio who'd lost her inheritance to her sister and had kept every receipt, every letter, every timestamp. She wrote, "You're not alone, and you're not crazy. I've been waiting for someone to say this out loud." I didn't cry then, either. But I finally understood. This wasn't just about Papa Leo. It was about all of us, the quiet ones. The ones who stayed silent because we were taught that speaking up was dramatic, ungrateful, not how family behaves. The ones who were told to forgive, to move on, to let it go, while the people who took from us got to keep the silence as their weapon. I didn't post this video to be a hero. I posted it because I needed to know. If I said it out loud, would anyone else remember what it felt like to be loved, and then erased? And now I knew. They remembered. And so did I. I closed my laptop. And for the first time since that day in the nursing home, I didn't feel afraid. I felt seen. And that, more than any deed, any court order, any signature, was the first real victory. I opened my notebook. Wrote one line at the top of the page. They thought silence was their shield. I'm going to make it their undoing. Then I began to list everything I had. And everything I still needed to find. The nursing home smelled like lavender soap and overcooked carrots, yes. But beneath that, there was something else. Something quieter, deeper. A scent that clung to the back of your throat like the ghost of a promise you'd forgotten you made. It was the same smell Papa Leo used to wear on Sundays. Not the cheap bottle of cologne he bought at the drugstore in bulk, the one he sprayed on his shirt collar like a ritual, the one that made my nose twitch when I hugged him as a kid. No, this was different. This was the scent of his old wool coat, the one he wore to church, the one he kept hanging in the back of his closet with a cedar block tucked inside the pocket. He spray it every Saturday night, just before bed, with a tiny atomizer he'd bought at a flea market decades ago. Lavender and sandalwood, asterisk he'd say, inhaling deeply like he was breathing in peace. That's what a man smells like when he's done right by the world. I hadn't thought of it in years. Until the day I walked into his old house, after the funeral, after the will reading, after my aunt had already begun sorting his things like they were inventory, and found that coat still hanging in the closet. Dusty, forgotten. I pulled it down, and as I did, the fabric released a whisper of that scent, faint but unmistakable. I buried my face in it. And I remembered. He'd worn that coat the last time he came to my apartment, not the one he'd bought for me, the one I was renting then, the tiny studio above the bakery on 5th with the cracked window and the landlord who never fixed the shower. He'd shown up unannounced, holding a paper bag with 2 cinnamon rolls and a thermos of coffee. "Thought you might need a real breakfast," he'd said. I'd been crying. I didn't tell him why. Just nodded and let him sit on the edge of my bed while he ate his roll in silence, watching the rain streak down the glass. After he left, I found a folded piece of paper tucked into the coat pocket. I didn't open it then. I was too tired, too angry, too afraid of what he might have written, another reminder that I was too sensitive, another plea to just be happy with what you have. I shoved the coat back into the closet and forgot about it. Until now. I stood in his house, coat in hand, the scent wrapping around me like an embrace, and I remembered something else. The way he'd looked at me that morning, standing by the window, watching the rain. Not with pity, not with sadness. With pride. He said nothing, just nodded once slowly, like he was memorizing the shape of me in that moment. I opened the coat pocket. Inside, folded smaller than a playing card, was a piece of tissue paper. On it, in his shaky but deliberate handwriting, was a single line. "For Maya, the apartment, don't let them make you beg for it." Beneath it, a date, October 14, 2018. 2 days after the deed was recorded. 2 days after he'd signed it. And the day after he'd visited me in my tiny, broken apartment. I hadn't known he'd been there. I hadn't known he'd seen it. I hadn't known he'd remembered asterisk. I sat down on the floor of his closet, coat draped over my lap, and I cried. Not the loud, gasping kind, but the quiet, shuddering kind that comes when you realize someone loved you more than you ever let yourself believe. And then I noticed something else. Tucked into the inner lining of the coat, near the hem, was a small, stiff rectangle, something that didn't belong. I pulled it free. A key. Not a house key, not a car key. A asterisk door asterisk key. Small, brass, with a tiny faded tag attached. 1427 Maple Lane, apt 3B asterisk. I turned it over in my fingers. It was warm. Not from the room, from me. From the fact that I'd been holding it all along. He hadn't just bought me an apartment. He'd given me the key. And he'd carried it with him, for years. Every Sunday, every visit, every time he put on that coat. He'd worn it like armor. Like a secret he was keeping safe, not from me, but from the world. From the people who would have tried to take it. From the ones who would have told him I didn't deserve it. From the ones who would have called him foolish. He'd kept it close, not in a safe, not in a drawer. In his coat, where he could feel it, where he could touch it. And when he asked me in that nursing home bed, "How's the apartment?" he wasn't confused. He was checking. He was making sure I still had it, that I hadn't let them take it, that I still remembered. I pressed the key to my chest. And for the first time since he died, I didn't feel alone. I felt chosen. The motif had begun. Lavender, the coat, the key. Not symbols. Evidence. He'd left me a trail, and I was finally learning how to follow it. For years, I thought my grandfather was just quiet. Not the loud, boisterous kind of quiet, the kind that means someone's shy or reserved. No, his quiet was deeper. He didn't speak because he didn't need to. He didn't argue because he'd already decided what mattered. He didn't talk about money or politics or who owed whom what because he believed those things were best left unsaid unless they were true enough to be carved into stone. I used to think that was weakness. I used to think that was passivity. I used to think it meant he didn't care enough to fight. But I was wrong. He didn't fight because he didn't have to. He fought in the quietest, most relentless way possible, by building something no one else could see. He worked 3 jobs for 23 years. The first as a mechanic at the old Ford dealership downtown, hands permanently stained with grease, nails cracked from winter winters, knees that popped when he stood up. The second as a night shift security guard at the warehouse on 8th, where he sat in a cold booth for 12 hours, staring at flickering monitors, sipping black coffee from a thermos he'd had since the 1980s. And the third. He drove for a small delivery service on weekends, hauling furniture, appliances, boxes of books, anything that needed moving, while the rest of the city slept. He never complained. Never said, "I'm tired." Never said, "I wish I could retire." Never said, "I wish I had more time with you." He just showed up. Every day. Every shift. Every Sunday morning, he'd be at the kitchen table before dawn, drinking coffee, reading the paper, and watching me eat my toast with the crusts cut off, because I'd always hated them. I thought it was just habit. It was. It was ritual. He was saving. Not for a vacation, not for a new car, not for a fancy funeral. He was saving for me. I didn't know it until I found his ledger. It wasn't in a bank safe, not in a filing cabinet, not even in his house. It was in the trunk of his old Chevy Impala, still parked in the driveway, covered in dust and pine needles, untouched since the day they took him to the hospital. I didn't want to open it. I didn't want to see what was inside. But I had to. So I dragged it out on a Saturday morning, the air thick with the scent of wet grass and distant rain. The trunk smelled like old leather, mothballs, and gasoline. I pried it open with a screwdriver, the rust screaming as it gave way. And there it was. A small brown leather-bound book, tied with a frayed red ribbon. I sat on the curb, knees pulled to my chest, and untied it. The first page was dated 1997. Maya's Fund. No other title, no explanation. Just that. And then, page after page, meticulous, careful, almost poetic in its restraint. March 12, 1998, $120 from Saturday delivery job. Maya turned 5, bought her the blue dress with the lace. She smiled so hard her cheeks hurt, worth every penny. June 3, 2001, $200 from overtime at the warehouse. Paid for her piano lessons. Teacher said she has natural rhythm. She doesn't play anymore. Doesn't matter. She will again. October 17, 2008, $350 from mechanic job. Paid for her college application fee. She didn't tell me she was applying. I found the envelope in her backpack. I cried in the garage. December 24, 2014, $500. Her mom said she's too stressed to come home for Christmas. I left a pie on her doorstep. She didn't answer the door. I waited in the car until she came out at 2 a.m. She hugged me, said, "I missed you." I didn't say anything, just held her. April 5, 2017, $1,200. First payment on the apartment. Not for me, for her. She needs a place where she can breathe, where no one tells her to be quieter, where she can come home and not have to explain why she's tired. I turn the page. October 12, 2018, final payment on apartment. $187,500, all cash, paid in full. Title recorded under her name. Deed filed. Todd clause added. No one else will touch it, not while I'm alive, not while I'm gone. I stopped breathing. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Because the numbers didn't add up. Not on paper. But in truth. They did. He'd saved every spare dollar, every overtime hour, every weekend shift, every meal he skipped, every pair of shoes he didn't buy, every holiday he spent working so his daughter wouldn't have to ask for help. He didn't leave me a house. He left me a sanctuary. And he didn't tell me because he knew if I knew, I'd try to stop him. I'd tell him it was too much. I'd say, "You need this for yourself." I'd beg him to keep it. And he knew me better than I knew myself. He knew I'd give it back. So he didn't tell me. He just built it. In silence. In secret. In the quietest kind of love. And when he asked me, in that nursing home bed, "How's the apartment?" he wasn't asking about square footage or windows. He was asking if I still knew how to breathe. If I still remembered that I deserved peace. If I still believed I was worth it. I closed the ledger. I held it to my chest. And I whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't see you." The wind rustled through the trees. And for the first time in my life, I felt like he heard me. Not because he answered, but because he never needed to. He'd already said everything. In the grease on his hands. In the coffee stains on his shirts. In the way he kept the coat. In the key. In the ledger. In the apartment. He didn't leave me money. He left me proof. That I was loved. That I was worth saving. That I didn't have to earn my right to be safe. I already had it. All I had to do was claim it. And I would. Not because I wanted to. But because he did. And that was enough. The memory care unit smelled like chamomile tea and antiseptic wipes, but beneath it all, always beneath it all, was the faint, stubborn ghost of lavender. I'd started bringing my grandfather's coat with me on visits. Not to wear, not to keep. Just to sit beside him on the chair, folded neatly like a silent witness. The staff didn't question it. They were used to the strange rituals of grief, people leaving photos, stuffed animals, handwritten letters tucked into pillows. I just left the coat. And every time I did, I'd sit very still, watching his face, waiting for something, anything, to shift. Then, on a Tuesday in late October, he looked at me. Not the way he had for months, vacant, drifting, half awake in a world that had slipped away. He looked at me. Fully. And he said, "You still have it, don't you?" I froze. My throat closed. My fingers curled around the edge of the chair. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because I didn't know if he meant the apartment. Or the coat. Or the key. Or me. He didn't wait. He reached out, not with the trembling, uncertain hand I'd come to expect, but with a quiet, deliberate motion, like a man who'd spent his whole life waiting for this moment to speak clearly. His fingers brushed the coat. Then, slowly, he lifted his gaze to mine. "Henry knows," he whispered. I didn't know who Henry was. Not really. He was my grandfather's older brother, quiet, stoic, the kind of man who showed up to funerals with a thermos of coffee and never spoke unless spoken to. He hadn't visited in over a year. I'd assumed he was too old, too frail. But Papa Leo's eyes held mine, and in them, I saw something I hadn't seen since before his diagnosis. Clarity. "He remembers," Papa Leo said. "He wrote it down." I swallowed hard, wrote what down. He didn't answer right away. His breath came slow, shallow. His lips parted as if he were gathering strength. Then, the day I bought it, the day I signed it, the day I knew you'd need it more than I ever needed to keep it. He closed his eyes. For a moment, I thought he'd drifted again. Then, just as I was about to reach for the call button, he whispered one more thing. Tell him I'm sorry I didn't give it to you sooner. And then he turned his face to the window. The sun was low, golden, spilling across the linoleum like honey. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat there, holding the coat, feeling the weight of his words settle into my bones. I didn't tell him I didn't know what he meant. I didn't tell him I didn't understand. I just nodded. And when the nurse came in 10 minutes later to check his vitals, she found me still there, quiet, still, eyes wet, but my hands were no longer trembling. That night, I called Henry. He answered on the third ring. I didn't introduce myself. I just said, Papa Leo told me you remember. Silence. Then, a long exhale. I remember, he said. I waited. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then, I was there when he signed the deed. My breath caught. He didn't want anyone to know, Henry continued, voice rough with age and something deeper, regret maybe. Not even you. He said if you knew, you'd try to give it back, and he didn't want you to feel guilty. I didn't say anything. I just listened. He made me witness it, Henry went on. Said he needed someone who'd been around long enough to know he wasn't confused. Said he needed someone who'd seen him cry when your mom left, and seen him work 3 jobs to pay for your braces, and seen him sit up all night because you had a fever and he didn't know what else to do. I could hear his breathing now, labored, slow. He made me sign it, Henry said. Right there at the notary's office. He didn't even let me read the whole thing, just said, if she ever needs a home, Henry, she needs it more than I need to hold on to it. Then he signed, and I signed, and we left. I closed my eyes. I didn't know, I whispered. No, he said, you weren't supposed to. Then after a pause, softer now, but I kept the note. I sat up straight. What note? The one he wrote me that night. After, he said, if I forget Henry, if I don't remember, you'll tell her. I didn't think I'd ever have to. He paused again. Then, I've carried it in my wallet for 6 years. I didn't ask. I didn't beg. I just said, can I see it? He didn't answer right away. Then quietly, I'll bring it tomorrow. The next day, he came alone. No cane, no walker, just a man in a worn tweed coat holding a small envelope. He didn't sit down. He stood in the doorway of my apartment, the same one Papa Leo had seen, the one with the cracked window and the leaky faucet. He handed me the envelope. Read it, he said, then decide if you want to show it to anyone. I opened it. Inside, on a yellowed piece of lined notebook paper, was a single paragraph, written in Henry's precise, looping script, same hand that had signed the deed. October 14, 2018. Robert Hargrove came to me after signing the deed. He was quiet, he didn't cry, he just said, she's going to need a place where she doesn't have to apologize for being tired. I asked him if he was sure. He said, I've watched her carry the weight of everyone else's expectations since she was 10. She deserves a place where she can just be. He gave me this note to hold. Said if he ever forgot or if someone tried to take it from her, I'd know what to say. I'm writing this now because I think the day is coming, and I want her to know he didn't leave her a house. He left her a sanctuary, and he didn't do it for legacy. He did it for love. I read it once. Then again. Then I folded it. And I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just walked to the window, my window, the one he'd seen, and I looked out at the city. The same city where he'd sat in his car for hours, waiting for me to come out after I'd cried myself to sleep. The same city where he'd left a pie on my doorstep when I didn't answer the door. The same city where he'd paid for my piano lessons, even though I'd quit. The same city where he'd bought me a home. And I realized, Henry hadn't just kept a note. He'd kept a promise. And Papa Leo hadn't just bought me an apartment. He'd entrusted me to someone who would remember. Even if he couldn't. Even if I didn't. Even if the world tried to erase it. He'd made sure someone would speak. And now I had to. I held the note to my chest. And for the first time since he died, I didn't feel like I was fighting to prove something. I felt like I was finally carrying something that had been meant for me all along. The motif had found its voice. Lavender. The coat. The key. And now the note. Not evidence. Testimony. From the man who'd been there. The one who remembered. And I was no longer alone. I was the keeper. And I would not let them take it. Not again. The first receipt didn't come with sirens or subpoenas. It didn't arrive in a lawyer's envelope or flash across a courtroom screen. It came tucked inside a stack of utility bills, flat, beige, unremarkable, delivered by the postman on a Tuesday morning, the same day the rain had turned the sidewalks to gray slush. I'd been staring at the apartment's mailbox for weeks, half expecting something. Some notice, some warning, some sign that someone had noticed the deed, that the system had woken up. But nothing ever came. The apartment sat empty, untouched, its keys still in my pocket like a secret I didn't know how to share. Then this. A bill. From the water department. Addressed to Maya Ruiz, 1427 Maple Lane, Apt 3B***. Date, March 14, 2019. Amount, $87.50. Paid in full. By Robert Hargrove. Automatic withdrawal, account H88127. I stared at it. Then I stared at it again. Then I turned it over. No return address. No logo. Just the official seal of the city's municipal services. And the signature line, where the account holder's name should have been, was filled in with my grandfather's full name. Not just Robert Hargrove, not Bob Asterisk, not Papa Asterisk. His full legal name, typed in crisp, institutional font, as if he'd sat in a government office and signed it himself. But he hadn't. He'd never been to that office. He'd never filled out any forms. He'd never even told me he'd set up automatic payments. I checked the date again. March 14, 2019. 2 months after he'd signed the deed. 3 weeks after he'd asked me about the apartment. And 2 days after his doctor had officially diagnosed him with early-stage vascular dementia. I called the number on the bill. A woman answered, polite, patient, professional. Her nameplate said Linda Asterisk. I didn't tell her who I was, didn't say I was the granddaughter, didn't mention the coat, the key, the note. I just asked, can you confirm who set up the automatic payment for this account? She paused. Then, the account was established under the name Robert Hargrove. He came in person on February 27, 2019. We verified his identity with his driver's license and social security card. He provided his bank account details. He requested the payment be drawn from his checking account at First Community Bank, under the account number you have on file. I swallowed. Did he say why he was setting it up under Ms. Ruiz's name? Another pause. Then softer, he said, she needs this place to be hers, not mine, not anyone else, just hers. He was very clear, very calm, and very firm. I didn't speak. I could hear the hum of the phone line, the distant clatter of a keyboard. And then Linda added, he also asked me to make sure the billing statement was sent to the address listed on the lease. He said, if she doesn't get it, she'll think it's not real. I told him, she'll get it. He nodded, said, good. Then he left. I thanked her. I hung up. I walked to the kitchen. I opened the cabinet. I pulled out the box of bills I'd been sorting. My own rent, my phone, my credit card, my student loan payments. And there it was, tucked under a receipt for groceries. A second bill. Same date. Same name. Same amount. From the electric company. Paid. In full. By Robert Hargrove. I sat down. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I just held both bills in my hands. And I thought about the day he'd come to my apartment. The one I thought he'd forgotten. The one I thought he'd never seen. He'd sat on the edge of my bed. He'd eaten the cinnamon roll. He'd watched the rain. And he'd known. He'd known I was living in a place that didn't feel like mine. He'd known I was tired. He'd known I didn't have the money to fix the shower. And he'd done something no one else would have done. He'd made it real. Not just on paper. Not just in a notary's office. But in the system. In the bills. In the records. In the quiet, relentless rhythm of monthly payments. He hadn't just given me a home. He'd made sure the world recognized it. He'd made sure the machines, cold, bureaucratic, impersonal machines, knew I belonged there. And then, when his mind began to slip, when the names started to blur, when the dates began to fade, he'd left behind proof. Not just signatures, not just deeds, but receipts. Little, ordinary, unglamorous receipts, proof that the transaction had happened, that the money had been paid, that the apartment was not a dream, not a fantasy, not a gift he might change his mind about. It was real, and it was mine. I pressed the 2 bills to my chest, and I whispered, "You didn't just buy me a place to live." I closed my eyes. "You bought me the right to breathe." And I knew then. My aunt hadn't just forged a signature. She hadn't just filed a revocation. She tried to erase more than a deed. She tried to erase the truth that had already been written, in bank logs, in utility records, in the quiet, stubborn rhythm of a man who refused to let love be forgotten. And now I had the receipts. 2 of them. And I knew, with a certainty that settled into my bones like warmth after a long winter, there would be more. Because he hadn't left anything to chance. He'd left a trail. And I was finally learning how to follow it. I asked her to help me sort through his things. Not because I believed she would. Not because I trusted her. But because I needed her to think I did. It was the day after I found the second utility bill, the electric one, and the realization had settled over me like a second skin. She hadn't just stolen the apartment. She stolen the asterisk memory of him. She'd turned his silence into proof of his confusion, his kindness into evidence of his decline, his love into a loophole. So I called her. "Can you come over?" I said, voice steady, soft. "I'm going through his closet. I found his coat. And I think there might be something in there, something he didn't want me to find." She didn't hesitate. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, voice thick with that familiar, performative tenderness. "I've been meaning to help you with that. You know how he was always hiding things in the oddest places? I'll be there in an hour." I hung up. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't make tea. I didn't even turn on the lights in the study. I just sat in the dark, waiting. When she arrived, she wore her family caregiver uniform, cardigan, pearls, a faint scent of vanilla perfume that always reminded me of funeral homes. She brought a box labeled asterisk, personal effects for Maya asterisk, the same box she'd given me after the funeral, filled with his socks and a half-used tube of toothpaste. She smiled when she saw me. "You look tired," she said. "I am," I said. She patted my shoulder. "It's okay, I'm here now." We went to his study. The door creaked the way it always had, the hinge groaning like an old man clearing his throat. She went straight to the filing cabinet. "I already went through this," she said, pulling open the bottom drawer. "Mostly just bills and old insurance papers. He kept everything in here, but it's all a mess. I threw out the junk." I didn't correct her. I didn't say, "You didn't throw out the junk. You took the truth." I just walked to the bookshelf. And I reached for the third shelf. The one he always said was, for the things that don't fit anywhere else. I pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook, thin, unassuming, the kind you buy at a gas station for $1.99. I opened it, and there it was. A list. In his handwriting. Things to do before I forget. And beneath it, numbered. 1. Sign deed for Maya's apartment. 2. Set up automatic payments. 3. Tell Henry. 4. Give her the key. 5. Hide the copy of the deed where she'll find it. 6. Spray the coat with lavender. 7. Say how's the apartment, one last time. I didn't speak. I just held it up. She didn't move. Her smile didn't fade. It just hardened, like a mask that had been glued on too long. That's just his rambling, she said, voice flat now. He wrote that stuff all the time, it means nothing. I turned the page. There was another list. What they'll say when I'm gone. And beneath it, written in the same careful hand. He was confused. He didn't know what he was doing. He was easily manipulated. Myra's too sensitive. She didn't visit enough. She doesn't understand family. She'll make a fuss. She'll take everything. I looked at her. She didn't look away. You wrote this, I said. She didn't answer. I turned the page again. There, taped to the inside back cover, was a photocopy of the original transfer on death deed. His signature, my name, the notary stamp. And beneath it, in blue ink, a single line. I signed this on October 12, 2018. I was lucid, I was clear, I was not fooled. I closed the book. I looked at her. You knew, I said. You knew he was planning to leave it to me. You knew he was writing this down, and you waited. She exhaled. Slowly. Like she was tired of pretending. I didn't know he'd do it, she said. I thought he was just being sentimental. Then I found the deed, and I saw how he'd written your name, and I realized he was leaving you everything. And you didn't even know he was alive. I didn't flinch. I didn't know, I said, but I do now. She stepped forward. Her voice dropped, low, urgent. You think this changes anything? He was gone. He was sick. The law doesn't care about his little lists. The law cares about signatures, and I have the official *1, the one that says the deed was revoked. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just reached into my coat pocket, and I pulled out the key, the one he'd carried in his coat, the one he'd slipped into my hand the day he asked me about the apartment. I held it up, and I said, this was in his pocket when he died. She went pale. I didn't give her time to react. I walked to the desk. I opened the drawer, and I pulled out the file I'd been keeping. The one with the utility bills. The one with the bank statement showing the $187,500 withdrawal from his account on October 10, 2018. The one with the time-stamped photo of him standing in front of the notary's office on October 12, 2018, wearing the same coat I'd found, holding a manila envelope, his face calm, his eyes clear. And beneath it, a printout from the county recorder's office. Transfer on death deed, recorded October 12, 2018. Valid, unrevoked. I looked at her. I didn't come here to fight you, I said. I came here to show you what you stole. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just looked at the key. And then at the photo. And then at me. And for the first time, I saw something I'd never seen before, not in all the years I'd known her. Fear. Not the fear of being caught. The fear of being seen *. And then she turned. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't take the box. She just walked out. And I didn't stop her. I didn't call after her. I didn't close the door. I just stood there, in the quiet of his study, holding the key. And I realized, this wasn't about the deed. It wasn't even about the apartment. It was about who got to be the keeper of his truth. And now I was. I walked to the window. I opened it. The wind came in. And for the first time since he died, I let myself breathe. Not because I'd won, but because I'd remembered. And he'd already won. He'd left me the proof. And he'd left me the courage. Now I just had to use it. I placed the key on the desk, next to the notebook, and I whispered, "I'm not letting go." The motif had deepened. The key, the coat, the note, the list, and now the truth. Not hidden, not buried, not silenced, just waiting for me to speak. And I would. I didn't go to the bank alone. I wore the coat, not because I thought it would protect me, but because I needed to feel him beside me. The branch was the same one he'd used for 20 years, small, brick-faced, with a sign that read * First Community Bank, serving our community since 1972 *. He'd always said it was the only place that treated him like a person, not an account number. He'd opened his checking account there the year after my grandmother died. "They remembered her name," he'd told me once. "That's how you know they're good." I walked in at 9:17 a.m. No appointment. No lawyer. No camera. Just me, the coat, and the file under my arm. The teller smiled. "Can I help you?" I didn't say my name. I didn't say why I was there. I just slid the file across the counter. Inside, the original transfer on death deed, the notarized copy, the bank statement showing the withdrawal, the utility bills, the list from his notebook, and the photo, clear, time-stamped of him standing outside the notary's office on October 12, 2018, holding the envelope with the deed. I pointed to the withdrawal. "Is this account still active?" She blinked. "It is." "Who authorized the transfer of $187,500 from this account on October 10, 2018? She looked at the document, then at me, then back at the screen. "Mr. Robert Hargrove." "Did he sign anything?" "Yes, he signed the withdrawal form." "Was he alone?" She hesitated. "Then, he was accompanied by a woman. She signed as a witness." I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "I need to see the original signature form and the witness signature, and I need to know if the witness signature matches the one on the revocation of the transfer on death deed filed in June 2022. She looked at me differently then. Not like a customer. Like someone who'd seen too much. She called over a manager. A man in a navy blazer, silver hair, name tag. Richard Langley, Senior Compliance Officer. He didn't smile. He didn't offer coffee. He just looked at the file. And then he looked at me. "You're his granddaughter." I didn't answer. I just nodded. He exhaled. "Then I remember him. He came in every month, always with that coat, always with a thermos. He'd sit in the corner and wait for his statement, never asked for help, never complained, just waited." He turned to the teller. "Pull the original withdrawal form and the witness affidavit from the deed revocation." She left. I stood there. The coat smelled like lavender, and the silence in the bank was so thick, I could hear the hum of the air conditioner. When she returned, she placed 2 documents on the counter. The first, the withdrawal form. Robert Hargrove's signature, same as on the deed, same as on the list in his notebook. Sharp, deliberate with that tiny upward flick on the L. Beneath it, the witness signature. Eleanor Hargrove. My aunt. I didn't say anything. Richard Langley didn't either. He picked up the second document, the revocation form. The one my aunt had filed in June 2022. The one she claimed proved my grandfather was of unsound mind. He held it up. Then he held the withdrawal form beside it. And he said, very quietly, "These signatures don't match." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. He turned to the computer. He pulled up the bank's internal audit log. "October 10, 2018, he said. "Withdrawal processed. Signature verified by our facial recognition system. Mr. Hargrove was present. He was alert. He spoke clearly. He said, "This money is for my granddaughter. She needs a home." He didn't ask for help. He didn't hesitate. He didn't seem confused. He paused. Then the signature on the revocation form, it's a forgery. It's been flagged before 2 other cases in the last year. Same handwriting pattern. Same attempt to mimic a shaky stroke. But this one is sloppy. He looked at me. "I'm sorry you had to come here for this." I didn't say thank you. I didn't cry. I just reached into my coat pocket. And I pulled out the key. The one he'd carried. The one he'd given me. I placed it on the counter. Next to the documents. "I didn't come here to take anything," I said. "I came here to prove he gave it to me." Richard Langley looked at the key. Then at me. Then at the signature. And he said, "I'll file a fraud report with the county, with the state, with the bank's internal ethics board, and I'll send you a certified copy of the verification for your records." He paused. Then softer, "Your grandfather, he was a good man." I nodded. And I walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. Because the truth wasn't in the documents. It was in the silence. In the way he'd sat in that corner every month, waiting for his statement. In the way he'd never asked for help. In the way he'd trusted the system to remember what people had forgotten. He hadn't needed me to fight for him. He'd needed me to believe him. And now the bank had. The second receipt wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a verdict. From the institution that had known him longest. From the machines that don't lie. From the system that had recorded his dignity before anyone tried to erase it. I stepped outside. The sun was warm. The sky was blue. And for the first time since I'd found the deed, I didn't feel like I was carrying a secret. I felt like I was carrying justice. And I knew. This was only the beginning. The motif had found its anchor. The key. The coat. The note. The list. The receipt. And now, the bank's validation. Not just proof. Corroboration. The world had begun to see him. And now, it would have to see me. I walked to my car. I opened the door. And I whispered, "You were right, Papa." I turned the key in the ignition. I'm not letting go. And for the first time, I meant it. Not as a threat. Not as a demand. But as a promise. To him. To myself. To the quiet ones who never get to speak. I would. And I would make sure the world listened. I didn't invite them to dinner. I invited them to truth. It was Thanksgiving. The same day, the same table, the same turkey basted in butter and regret. I'd spent weeks preparing. Not the food, not the table settings, not even the speeches. I prepared the silence. I arranged the chairs in a half circle around the dining table, the way he used to when he'd sit with us on holidays, his back straight, his hands folded, his eyes watching us like he was memorizing our faces. I placed his empty chair at the head. I didn't move it. I didn't cover it. I just left it there, like a question no one wanted to answer. I didn't tell anyone what I was going to say. I didn't send an email. I didn't post a notice. I just texted my aunt, "Come to the house at 6, I need you here." She replied, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I didn't answer. When they arrived, my mother, my uncle, my cousin, my aunt. Even the family friend who always brought the cranberry sauce, they all smiled. Too wide, too practiced, like they were walking into a scene they'd rehearsed. My mother kissed my cheek. "You look tired, sweetheart." My uncle clapped my shoulder, still living in that little box. My cousin said, "I heard you're fighting about the lake house. Can't you just let it go?" I didn't answer. I just poured the wine. I served the turkey. I passed the rolls. And when the last plate was set, I stood. No one moved. I didn't ask for silence. I didn't need it. because the silence was already there, thick, heavy, waiting. I walked to the sideboard. I opened the drawer, and I pulled out the folder. Not a legal document. Not a lawsuit. Just a single sheet of paper. The letter. The one from Grandpa's financial advisor. The one he'd written in June 2018, 3 weeks before his diagnosis deepened. To whom it may concern. I am writing to confirm that on June 14, 2018, Mr. Robert Hargrove came to me with a clear, coherent, and emotionally grounded intention to transfer ownership of his property at 1427 Maple Lane, apartment 3B, to his granddaughter, Maya Ruiz. He did not ask for advice. He did not ask for permission. He asked for confirmation that his wishes would be honored. He said, "She doesn't need my money. She needs a place where she can stop apologizing for being tired." He was lucid. He was calm. He was certain. He has no other heirs who depend on him. His daughter is financially secure. His granddaughter is not. I have no reason to doubt his intent. I have every reason to protect it. Jonathan Reed, certified financial planner, Hargrove and Reed Advisors. I didn't read it aloud. I held it up. And I said, this was written before he forgot his own name. I let the words hang. My mother's fork clinked against her plate. My uncle's face went tight. My aunt didn't move. I walked to the table. I placed the letter in the center. Then I pulled out the second document. The bank's certified verification. The one from Richard Langley. The signature on the withdrawal form of October 10, 2018, matches the verified signature of Robert Hargrove. The witness signature on the revocation document filed June 2022 does not match. The revocation is invalid. I placed it beside the letter. Then I pulled out the third. The deed. The original, notarized transfer on death deed. Recorded October 12, 2018. Signed by Robert Hargrove. Witnessed by Henry Hargrove. Then the fourth. The note from Henry. The one he'd carried in his wallet for 6 years. Then the fifth. The list from his notebook. Say, how's the apartment, one last time. I didn't speak. I just laid them out. One after another. Like a trail. Like a map. Like a love letter written in paper and ink. My mother started crying. Not the loud, dramatic kind. The quiet, broken kind. The kind that comes when you realize you've been wrong for so long, you've forgotten how to be right. My uncle stood up. He didn't say anything. He just walked to the window. He looked out. And then he said, I knew. We all turned. He didn't look at us. He kept looking out. I knew he was buying her something, he said. I saw him come home one night with a key in his hand. He didn't say anything, just held it like it was a baby. I asked him, what is that? He said, it's the key to her peace. I didn't say anything. I didn't stop him. I thought he was just being sentimental. I thought it would pass. He turned. His eyes were wet. I didn't stop her. He looked at my aunt. She didn't look back. She was staring at the letter. At the bank's verification. At the list. At the key. I walked to her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just said, you knew he was lucid that day. She didn't answer. I said, you knew he signed it himself. She didn't move. I said, you knew he wrote this. I touched the list. And then I said, you knew he loved her more than you ever loved him. Her breath caught. Just once. Then she stood. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just picked up her purse. And she walked to the door. I didn't stop her. I didn't call after her. I didn't say, wait. I didn't say, forgive me. I just watched her go. And when the door closed, when the last of them was gone, I turned back to the table. To the turkey, still warm. To the wine, still poured. To the chair at the head. Empty. I sat down. I took the key from my pocket. I placed it on the table, next to the letter, next to the deed, next to the list, and I whispered, "You were right, Papa." I didn't say, "I won." I didn't say, "They lost." I just said, "You were right." And for the first time since he died, I didn't feel like I was fighting. I felt like I was honoring. The motif had reached its crescendo. The coat, the key, the note, the list, the receipt, the bank. And now, the truth, spoken in a room full of people who had chosen to look away. But I hadn't. I had looked, and I had seen, and I had not looked away. I reached for the wine. I poured myself a glass. I didn't drink it. I just held it. And I said, "I'm not letting go." Not because I hate her. Not because I want to punish. But because I love him. And I will not let the quiet be stolen again. The turkey cooled. The candles flickered. And in the silence, for the first time, I felt peace. Not because justice was served, but because it was seen. And he was remembered. Not as a confused old man, but as a father, as a grandfather, as a man who gave his last breath to give his granddaughter a home. And now, she would live in it, not as a beneficiary, not as a victim, but as its keeper, and its voice. And I would not be silent again. The letter didn't come in an envelope. It came in a manila folder, sealed with a red ribbon, like something from another century, something meant to be opened slowly, ceremoniously, with reverence. I found it on my doorstep the morning after Thanksgiving. No return address. No stamp. Just my name, written in the same precise, deliberate script I'd seen in his notebook. Maya Ruiz. I didn't open it right away. I sat on the porch step, wrapped in his coat, the lavender scent still clinging like a promise, and I stared at it for nearly an hour. The sky was gray, the air was cold. A single leaf, stubborn and gold, clung to the railing. I thought about the last time I'd seen my aunt. The way she hadn't looked at me when she left. The way she hadn't said goodbye. Not because she was angry. Because she was afraid. Afraid of what I'd seen. Afraid of what I'd become. Afraid that if she looked at me too long, she'd see herself in me. And she didn't want to. I picked up the folder. I carried it inside. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one he'd scrubbed every Sunday, the one where he'd eaten his toast with the crusts cut off, the one where I'd cried the night I found the deed. I untied the ribbon. It came loose like a sigh. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Not typed. Not printed. Handwritten. In ink. And beneath it, a signature. Not hers. Not mine. Not his. But hers. My aunt's. I read it. Slowly. Like I was reading a eulogy written by the person who'd buried the truth. Maya, I'm not writing this to apologize. I don't know how to say the words that would make this right. I don't even know if I believe they exist. I'm writing because I saw you yesterday. Not the way you were when you were little, holding his hand like he was the only thing keeping you from falling. Not the way you were when you were 17, crying in the car because you thought no one noticed you were hurting. Not the way you were when you came to the nursing home, quiet, holding his coat like it was the last thing he'd ever given you. I saw you as you are now. You didn't shout, you didn't scream, you didn't beg, you didn't call me a thief. You didn't say, "I told you so." You just laid out the truth, like a meal you cooked for someone who'd forgotten how to eat. And I realized you didn't want revenge. You wanted him to be remembered. And I wanted to be the one who remembered him. But I chose the wrong version. I told myself he was confused. I told myself you were too sensitive. I told myself the apartment was just a house. I told myself I was protecting the family. I told myself I was doing what he would have wanted. But I was lying. I lied to you. I lied to your mother. I lied to Henry. I lied to myself. I stole his love and called it necessity. I stole his dignity and called it care. I stole his voice and called it silence. The day he signed the deed, I was there. I saw him. He wasn't confused. He was clear. He was calm. He looked at me and said, "Eleanor, this is for Maya. Don't let anyone take it from her." I nodded. I said, "Of course." And then I filed the revocation 2 weeks later. I didn't think you'd find out. I didn't think anyone would care. I thought if I just kept quiet long enough, the truth would disappear. But you didn't let it. You made it visible. You made it real. And now I have to be real too. I'm returning the original deed I kept in my safe. I'm withdrawing the fraudulent revocation from the county records. I've already contacted the bank. I've already spoken to the attorney. I've already told my sister you were right. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for your trust. I'm not asking to be part of your life again. I'm just asking you to know this. He loved you more than he loved himself. And I was the one who tried to bury it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I hope one day you can find peace in the apartment he gave you. I won't come back. But I will never forget what you showed me. Eleanor. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw it across the room. I just sat there, holding the paper, feeling the weight of every word. Not as a confession, as a surrender. Not as an apology, as an ending. And I realized, this wasn't justice. This was grace. The kind that doesn't come from courts. The kind that comes when someone finally looks in the mirror and sees what they've done. She didn't beg. She didn't plead. She didn't ask me to understand. She just said I was wrong. And in that moment, I didn't feel powerful. I felt heavy. Because I'd spent so long preparing for war. For shouting, for lawsuits, for public humiliation. That I hadn't prepared for this. For the quiet collapse of someone who'd spent years pretending to be the good one. For the unbearable weight of her own truth. I folded the letter. I placed it in the folder. I tied the ribbon again. And I walked to the window. I looked out at the street. At the trees. At the apartment building in the distance. 1427 Maple Lane. I had the key. I had the deed. I had the bank's verification. I had the letter. And now, I had her confession. Not because I forced it, but because I refused to let her disappear. Because I didn't chase her. I just stayed. And waited. And showed her the truth. And when she saw it, she couldn't look away. I didn't call her. I didn't text her. I didn't send a reply. I didn't say a word. I just opened the drawer. I took out the key. And I placed it beside the letter. On the kitchen table. Where he used to sit. Where he used to watch me. Where he used to say, "You deserve peace." I didn't keep it. I didn't burn it. I didn't frame it. I just let it be. Because some truths aren't meant to be weapons. Some are meant to be held. And then, quietly, let go. The motif had reached its quietest, most devastating note. The coat. The key. The note. The list. The receipt. The bank. The gathering. And now, the letter. Not a weapon. Not a victory. But a mirror. And in it, I saw not just what she had done, but what I had become. Not a daughter of rage. Not a granddaughter of revenge. But a keeper of truth. And that was the only inheritance I ever needed. I sat down. I closed my eyes. And for the first time since he died, I didn't feel the need to speak. I just felt the need to be still. And in that stillness, I heard him. Not in words. Not in memories. but in the silence between them. And he was saying, "You didn't lose me. You found me. And now you are mine." I opened my eyes. I stood. I walked to the door. I opened it. The wind came in. Cold. Clean. Free. I stepped outside. And I didn't look back. I just walked. Toward the apartment. Toward the key. Toward the life he'd built for me. Not in money. Not in property. But in love. And I would live in it. Not as a survivor. Not as a fighter. But as a woman who had been loved. And who would not forget. I unlocked the door. I stepped inside. I closed it behind me. And I whispered, "I'm home." The judge didn't bang a gavel. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even look up from her desk when the clerk announced, "Case 22-CV1087, Ruiz v. Hargrove, petition to confirm validity of transfer on death deed." She just nodded and said, "Proceed." I didn't stand. I didn't wear a suit. I wore the coat. And I carried nothing in my hands. Not files. Not documents. Not even the key. Because I didn't need them. The court had already seen them. The bank's certified verification. The notarized deed. Henry's affidavit. The financial advisor's letter. My aunt's handwritten confession. The list from his notebook. The time-stamped photo of him holding the envelope outside the notary's office. The utility bills. The withdrawal record. The county recorder's confirmation that the revocation was fraudulent. All of it had been submitted. All of it had been reviewed. All of it had been acknowledged. And now, this was just formality. The judge finally looked up. At me. Not at my lawyer. Not at the court reporter. Not at the empty chair where my aunt should have been. At me. And she said, "You're the granddaughter." I nodded. She didn't ask if I was the one who found the deed. Didn't ask if I'd been lied to. Didn't ask if I'd been betrayed. She just said, "You kept his coat." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She looked down at the file, then back at me. And she said, "He was a good man." I swallowed. And I whispered, "Yes, Your Honor." She paused. Then she picked up the pen. And she signed. One swift, quiet motion. The order was issued. The transfer on death deed for the property located at 1427 Maple Lane, Apartment 3B, recorded October 12, 2018, is hereby confirmed as valid and unrevoked. The fraudulent revocation filed June 2022 is null and void. Ownership of the property vests immediately in Maya Ruiz as named grantee. The court finds no evidence of undue influence or incapacity on the part of Robert Hargrove at the time of execution. The court further finds that the petitioner acted with integrity, patience, and moral clarity throughout this proceeding. She set the pen down. She didn't smile. She didn't clap. She didn't say, "Congratulations." She just looked at me again and said, "You did what he asked you to do." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. And then, she said something I would carry with me forever. "You didn't fight to take something." She paused. "You fought to give him back his dignity." I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just walked out. No one followed me. No one congratulated me. No one took photos. No one shouted. The courthouse was quiet, just like he would have wanted it. Outside, the sun was low. The sky was the color of the lavender he sprayed on his coat. I didn't go home. I didn't call my mother. I didn't post anything. I walked. Just walked. Until I found myself at the corner of Maple Lane. I stood across from the building. 3 stories, brick, small, neat windows, a wrought iron gate, A single maple tree just beginning to turn, its leaves glowing gold in the afternoon light. I'd never been inside. I'd never seen it. Not until now. I didn't go in. I didn't open the gate. I didn't press the buzzer. I just stood there. And I thought about the day he came here. He walked up this sidewalk. He looked at this building. He'd seen the windows. He'd imagined me there. Not as a tenant. Not as a renter. Not as someone who owed anyone anything. But as someone who belonged. He'd paid for it in cash. He'd signed it in silence. He'd given me the key. He'd set up the utilities. He'd written the letter. He told Henry. He'd left the list. And he'd waited. For me to find it. For me to believe it. For me to stand here. Alone. And finally see it. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just took a breath. And I whispered, "I'm here, Papa." And then, I turned. I walked away. Not because I didn't want to go in, but because I didn't need to. Not yet. Because the house wasn't the gift. The gift was the fact that he believed I deserved it. That he didn't wait for me to ask. That he didn't ask me if I was worthy. That he didn't make me earn it. He just gave it. And now, I was ready to receive it. Not as a victory. Not as a prize. But as a promise. The reversal wasn't in the paperwork. It was in me. I had spent my whole life believing I needed to be louder to be seen. To be stronger to be safe. To be louder to be loved. But he had shown me something else. That love doesn't shout. It waits. It pays. It signs. It remembers. It carries a key. It sprays lavender on a coat. It leaves a note. It asks, "How's the apartment?" And when you're ready, it gives you the answer. I walked home. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't make tea. I just sat in the dark. And I held the coat. And I thought, I didn't win this. I inherited it. And now, I would live in it. Not to prove anything. Not to punish anyone. Not to show them I was right. But because I was finally ready to be at peace. The motif had reached its final form. The coat. The key. The note. The list. The receipt. The bank. The gathering. The letter. And now, the quiet. Not the silence of fear. Not the silence of shame. But the silence of belonging. And I had earned it. Not by fighting. But by staying. By listening. By remembering. By holding on. And by finally letting go. Of the need to be right. Of the need to be seen. Of the need to be angry. I closed my eyes. And for the first time since he died, I didn't feel like I was carrying his memory. I felt like I was living it. And that was the true reversal. Not in the court. Not in the deed. But in me. I stood. I walked to the window. I opened it. The wind came in. And I whispered, "I'm home. Not in the apartment. Not yet. But here. In this moment. In this breath. In this heart. I was home. And I was finally, quietly, free." I didn't hear from her again. Not a text, not a call, not a letter, not even a card left on my doorstep. I expected anger. I expected blame. I expected her to disappear into the silence she'd spent so long cultivating. But I didn't expect this. The first sign came 3 weeks after the court ruling. A small package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Just my name, written in the same precise, careful script as the letter, *Maya Ruiz*, on a plain brown envelope. I didn't open it right away. I held it in my hands, It was light, thin, like a book of poems or a single sheet of paper. I sat on the floor by the window, the same window he'd watched me from, the one I now stared out of every morning before the sun rose. I untied the ribbon. Inside, a key. Not the one I'd been given. Not the one I'd carried in my pocket for months. This one was smaller, older, brass worn smooth at the edges, the tag barely legible. 1427 Maple Lane, Apt 2B. I froze. Apt 2B. That was the unit below mine. I hadn't even known there was another apartment in the building. I opened the envelope again. Tucked beneath the key was a folded note. Not handwritten. Printed. On thick, cream-colored stationery. And at the bottom, a signature. Eleanor Hargrove. I read it. Slowly. Then again. Maya asterisk. I've lived in this building since 1983. I bought 2B with my husband. We raised our son here. We celebrated birthdays, buried our dog, watched the seasons change through those same windows you now look out of. When I filed the revocation, I didn't just take your apartment. I took his memory. I told myself I was protecting the family. I told myself I was doing what was practical. I told myself you'd never know. I told myself he wouldn't remember. But you did. And now I know what I did was wrong, not because you proved it in court, but because I saw how you carried his love. Quietly, without rage, without vengeance, just with truth. I've sold 2B, the buyer is moving in next week. I'm leaving town. But I didn't want to leave without giving you this. I kept the key all these years because I thought it would remind me of what I had, but it only reminded me of what I lost. This is yours now. Not because you earned it. Not because I owe you. But because you showed me what it means to be loved without condition. The apartment above you, that was his gift to you. The one below, this was mine. And now it's yours too. I won't be back. But if you ever want to know what it was like here, before the silence asterisk, you're welcome to come down. No expectations. No apologies. Just the key. Eleanor asterisk. I sat there for a long time. The key felt warm in my palm. Not from the sun. From the weight of what it meant. She hadn't just returned something. She offered me something no one else had. A bridge. Not to forgive. Not to reconcile. But to witness asterisk. To know. To understand. That she hadn't just stolen a deed. She stolen a life. And now, she was giving me the key to the room where that life had been lived. I didn't go down that night. I didn't knock. I didn't open the door. I just held the key. And I thought about the last time I'd seen her. The way she'd walked out of the house. The way she hadn't looked back. I thought about the letter. The way she'd written it, not to beg but to break. And now this. Not a gift. Not a peace offering. A confession. In the form of a key. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. Not empty. But open. Like a door I hadn't known was locked. I walked to the window. I looked down. The apartment below mine had a small porch, a single chair, a potted geranium that had gone brown in the cold. I'd never noticed it before. Now I saw it. Every day. I started leaving things on my windowsill. Not for her. For him. A cup of coffee. A cinnamon roll. A photograph of him, smiling in his coat, holding the key. I didn't leave notes. I didn't write messages. I just left the things. And every morning, I'd look down. And sometimes, the coffee cup was gone. The roll was gone. The photograph was still there. And the geranium, it started to green. Just a little. At the edges. I didn't know if she was taking them. I didn't know if she was watching. I didn't care. I was no longer doing this for her. I was doing it for him. For the man who'd given me a home. And for the woman who tried to bury it. I didn't need her to say sorry. I didn't need her to come back. I just needed to know that love could still live in the quiet. That even when someone broke something, they could still leave the key. And that sometimes, the most powerful act of justice isn't punishment. It's permission. Permission to be seen. Permission to be healed. Permission to let go. I started going down to the basement once a week. To the laundry room. To the shared garden space. I'd sit on the bench near the geranium. I'd bring a book. I'd sit in silence. And I'd talk to him. Not out loud. Just in my head. I'm here, Papa. I'm not alone. I see the light in the windows. I see the green on the plant. I see her. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just here. One day, I found a single red geranium bloom on the bench. Not mine. Not from my windowsill. Fresh. Still dewy. I picked it up. Held it. And I whispered, "Thank you." I didn't know if she'd put it there. I didn't need to. I just placed it on the windowsill. Next to his photograph. And I didn't move it. For the first time since I'd inherited the apartment. I didn't feel like I was fighting for it. I didn't feel like I was defending it. I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to apologize. I just felt like I was living it. The motif had transformed. The coat. The key. The note. The list. The receipt. The bank. The gathering. The letter. The reversal. And now, the geranium. Not a weapon. Not a symbol of victory. But a sign that life could still grow. Even in the cracks. Even after everything. Even when the people who broke it didn't know how to fix it. I opened the door to the apartment below. I didn't go in. I just stood in the doorway. I looked around. The walls were pale yellow. The floorboards were worn. The kitchen window faced east. And on the counter, a single chipped teacup. White. With a tiny flower painted on the side. I didn't touch it. I didn't take it. I just looked at it. And I thought, this was her home. This was where she lived. This was where she cried. This was where she woke up every morning and remembered what she'd done. And now, she'd given me the key. Not to take it. Not to replace her. But to honor it. To hold it. To remember that even the people who hurt us can still choose to be human. I closed the door. I walked back upstairs. I sat at the kitchen table. I poured myself tea. I took a sip. It was cold. I didn't care. I reached for the key. The one from 2B. And I placed it beside the one from 3B. Side by side. On the table. Where he used to sit. Where he used to watch me. Where he used to say, "You deserve peace." I didn't say anything. I just sat. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of his death. I felt like I was holding the light of his life. And I was no longer afraid to let it shine. The motif was complete. Not with a victory, but with a quiet. Not with a shout, but with a bloom. And I was finally home. Not because I had the deed. Not because I won the case. But because I had learned that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just leaves a key and waits for you to open the door. I didn't move into the apartment right away. I didn't pack boxes, didn't hire movers, didn't hang curtains or buy new sheets, didn't even turn on the lights in the living room for the first week. I just sat, in the dark, on the floor, with the coat draped over my shoulders. The key to 3B hung from a nail on the wall beside the door. No frame, no plaque, just the brass key, catching the light like a small, quiet star. I'd been here before. In my mind. In my dreams. In the quiet hours when I couldn't sleep. But I'd never been here, not really. Not as the owner. Not as the one who belonged. Not as the one who had the right to be tired. To be silent. To be whole. I'd spent my life learning how to shrink. How to apologize for taking up space. How to smile when I wanted to cry. How to say, I'm fine, when I was falling apart. But this apartment, this place he'd bought for me, wasn't a place to perform. It was a place to rest. So I didn't fix it. I just let it be. I opened the windows. Let the wind come in. Let the dust settle. I walked through each room barefoot. I ran my fingers along the windowsill. I sat in the bathtub and listened to the water drip. I stood in the kitchen and imagined him there. Not as a ghost. As a presence. The way he'd stand at the counter, humming, stirring coffee with his spoon, watching me eat toast with the crusts cut off. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just breathed. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to explain why I was quiet. I didn't feel like I had to justify my stillness. I didn't feel like I had to prove I was worthy of peace. I just was. One morning, I woke up and the geranium on the windowsill had bloomed again. Bright red. Full. Alive. I didn't water it. I hadn't touched it in weeks. But it was still there. Stronger. I looked down. And I saw something on the counter. A note. Not handwritten. Not printed. A single leaf. Pressed flat. A maple leaf. Crisp, gold perfect. Tucked beneath a teacup. The same chipped one from below. I didn't know if she'd left it. I didn't care. I picked it up. I pressed it to my chest. And I whispered, thank you. I didn't go downstairs. I didn't knock. I didn't leave anything in return. I just kept the leaf. And I placed it inside the notebook he'd left. The one with the list. The one with the words. Say how's the apartment, one last time. I turned to the last page. And I wrote my own line. In his handwriting. As if I were him. I'm here. I closed the book. I placed it on the shelf. Next to the coat. Next to the key. Next to the photograph of him. And I sat. And I waited. Not for her. Not for anyone. Just for me. To be ready. 2 weeks later, I got a call. From the building manager. Ms. Ruiz, there's a woman here. She says she's a friend of your grandfather. I didn't ask who. I just said, I'll be down. I wore the coat. I didn't comb my hair. I didn't put on makeup. I walked down the stairs slowly. And there she was. In the hallway. Leaner. Smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Her hair was gray now, not dyed, just natural. She held a small box. Not wrapped. Just tied with twine. She didn't smile. She didn't look away. She just looked at me. And she said, I came to return something. I didn't speak. I just nodded. She handed me the box. Inside, a stack of photographs. Not recent. Old. Black and white. And one in color. I opened them. There he was. At the lake with me when I was 5. I was wearing a yellow raincoat. He was holding my hand. There he was, at the county fair, me on his shoulders, both of us laughing. There he was, on the porch of this very building, just after he bought it, holding the key in his hand, smiling. And then, the last one. Color. Taken last year. He was sitting in his chair in the nursing home. Smiling. And beside him, Eleanor, holding his hand, not pretending, not performing, just holding it. And in the background on the wall, a small framed photograph of me from my college graduation. He'd put it there, and she'd left it. I looked up. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just said, "I thought you should have them." I didn't say anything. I just hugged her. Not the kind of hug that says, "I forgive you." Not the kind that says, "We're okay now." Just the kind that says, "I see you. And I'm not afraid." She didn't hug me back. Not at first. But then, very slowly, her arms came around me. Just for a second. And then she pulled away. She didn't look at me. She just whispered, "He loved you more than he loved his own peace." I nodded. She turned and walked away. I didn't call after her. I didn't follow. I just stood there, holding the box, holding the photographs, holding the truth. And I realized she hadn't come to make amends. She'd come to bear witness, to say I saw it, to say I was wrong, to say I didn't know how to love him right. And now, she was leaving it with me. Not as a gift, not as a burden, but as a testament that even the people who hurt us can still love us in the ways they know how. Even if it's too late, even if it's quiet, even if it's broken. I went back upstairs. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat on the floor again, and I spread the photographs out around me, like a mosaic of his life, his love, his quiet, stubborn, unshakable care. I took the maple leaf from the notebook, and I placed it on top of the photo of him holding the key, right in the center. Then I took the key from the nail, and I placed it beside the leaf, and I whispered, "I'm here, Papa." I didn't say it to her. I didn't say it to the world. I said it to him. And for the first time, I meant it. Not as a promise, not as a vow, but as a truth. I was here. Not because I won. Not because I fought. Not because I had the deed. But because I had his love. And that was enough. The motif had reached its final, sacred form. The coat. The key. The note. The list. The receipt. The bank. The gathering. The letter. The reversal. The geranium. The leaf. And now, the photographs. Not proof of loss. Proof of love. And I was no longer the girl who had to prove she belonged. I was the woman who knew she always had. I didn't need to fix the past. I didn't need to punish the people who broke it. I just needed to hold it, and carry it, and live in it. I stood. I walked to the window. I opened it. The wind came in, and I whispered, "I'm home." Not because I had a roof, not because I had walls, but because I had memory. And memory is the only home that never leaves you. I closed the window. I sat down, and I didn't move for hours. Just breathing, just being, just here. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to say I was worthy. I just knew I was. And that was all I needed. The apartment was quiet. The key was warm. And I was finally deeply at peace. I didn't throw a party. I didn't invite anyone. I didn't post a photo. I didn't write a caption. I didn't say, "I did it." I didn't need to. The first morning I woke up in the apartment as its true owner. No longer a beneficiary, no longer a claimant, no longer a victim. I didn't turn on the lights. I just opened the window. Let the dawn in. The air was cool, clean, still. I walked barefoot through each room, not to inspect, not to admire, not to prove anything, but to remember. To touch the sill where he used to sit. To press my palm against the wall where he'd leaned while he waited for me to come home. To sit in the chair by the window and imagine him humming, just like he did on Sundays. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just breathed. And for the first time since I was a child, I didn't feel the need to explain why I was quiet. I didn't feel the need to justify my stillness. I didn't feel the need to apologize for taking up space. I just was. I made tea. Not in the fancy mug I bought when I moved into the city. Not in the one with the slogan, "Coffee is my love language." I used the chipped white cup. The one from below. The one she'd left. I poured the tea slowly. Watched the steam rise. Let it curl into the morning light. And then I walked to the bookshelf. I pulled out his notebook. The one with the list. The one with the last line I'd written, "I'm here." I opened it. And I wrote one more line. Not in his handwriting. Not in mine. In the space between. "You didn't give me a home." I paused. Then I wrote. "You gave me the courage to make one." I closed the book. I placed it beside the photographs. Beside the key. Beside the maple leaf. Beside the geranium, now full and blooming, red as his coat. I didn't move anything. I didn't rearrange. I didn't decorate. I didn't need to. The apartment wasn't mine because I owned the deed. It was mine because I had finally stopped running. Because I had stopped trying to be someone else's version of peace. Because I had stopped apologizing for being tired. Because I had stopped believing that love had to be loud to be real. I walked to the door. I opened it. I didn't lock it. I didn't need to. I stepped outside. To the porch. To the bench. To the geranium that had survived winter. I sat. And I waited. Not for her. Not for anyone. Just for the quiet. The kind that comes after the storm. After the court. After the confession. After the silence has been honored. I didn't know how long I sat. An hour. Maybe 2. The sun climbed. The birds came. A neighbor walked by with a dog. She smiled. I smiled back. No words. Just recognition. A quiet nod between 2 people who have known loss. That afternoon, I went to the bank. Not to check my balance. Not to file paperwork. I went to the same teller who'd helped me that day, the one who'd recognized his signature. I didn't say anything. I just placed the notebook on the counter. And the key. And the photograph of him holding the key. And I said, "He gave me this." She looked at the photo. She looked at the notebook. She looked at me. And she didn't say, "Congratulations." She didn't say, "You won." She just said softly, "He was proud of you." I nodded. I didn't cry. I just took the key. And walked out. That night, I lit a candle. Not for him. Not for me. For the quiet. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. The kind that doesn't need to be spoken. I sat in the dark. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll through my phone. I just sat. And I thought about the last thing he ever said to me. "How's the apartment?" I hadn't known what he meant then. I knew now. He wasn't asking about the walls. Or the windows. Or the square footage. He was asking, "Are you safe? Are you still breathing? Do you still believe you deserve peace?" I closed my eyes. And I whispered, "I'm here, Papa." And for the first time, I didn't say it to the past. I said it to the future. I said it to the woman I was becoming. The one who didn't need to prove she was worthy. The one who didn't need to fight to be seen. The one who could sit in silence without shame. The one who could open a door without fear. The one who could live in a home. Not because she'd won it, but because she'd finally learned how to belong. I didn't fix the apartment. I let it fix me. The motif had become something deeper than symbol. It was no longer just the coat. The key. The note. The list. The receipt. The bank. The gathering. The letter. The reversal. The geranium. The leaf. The photographs. It was now. The quiet. The sacred, unspoken, unshakable quiet. The kind that doesn't shout. That doesn't demand. That doesn't need applause. That just is. And I had finally learned how to sit in it. Without fear. Without apology. Without needing to explain. I walked to the window. I opened it. The wind came in. It smelled like lavender. And I whispered, "I'm home." Not because I had a roof. Not because I had walls. Not because I had a deed. But because I had remembered. That love doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes, it comes in a key. In a coat. In a quiet question. In a geranium that blooms after winter. In a teacup left on a counter. In a photograph you didn't know you had. In a silence you finally stopped running from. And in a heart that learns. It was never broken. Just waiting. To be held. I closed the window. I turned off the candle. I lay down. And for the first time since he died, I slept. Not because I was tired, but because I was safe. And that was the only inheritance I ever needed. The apartment was quiet. The key was warm. And I was finally deeply whole. I didn't need to say it. I didn't need to prove it. I just knew. And that was enough. I was home. And I would never leave again. I didn't post a video. I didn't write a caption. I didn't say, "This is the end." I didn't even turn on the camera. I just sat at the kitchen table, same one he scrubbed every Sunday, and I poured myself tea in the chipped white cup. The candle was lit. The window was open. The geranium bloomed again. The coat hung on the hook. The key rested on the windowsill. The notebook lay open. And on the last page, in the space between his words and mine, I had written, "You didn't give me a home. You gave me the courage to make one." I didn't need to say more. I didn't need to explain. I didn't need to convince anyone that I was right. That I had won. That I had been hurt. That I had been seen. Because the truth wasn't in the video. It wasn't in the court documents. It wasn't in the bank certification. It wasn't even in the letter she wrote. The truth was here. In the quiet. In the way the light fell across the floor at 4:17 p.m. In the way the wind lifted the edge of the notebook. In the way the lavender scent still clung to the coat, even after all this time. I looked out the window. Down at 2B. The door was open. Just a crack. And on the porch, just like every morning now, there was a single red geranium. Not mine. Not hers. Just there. Like a promise. Like a peace offering. Like a quiet asterisk, I'm still here. I didn't go down. I didn't leave anything. I didn't need to. We didn't need to fix what was broken. We just needed to let it be. I picked up the notebook. I turned to the first page. The one that said, "Things to do before I forget." I traced the words with my finger. I whispered them aloud. Sign deed for Maya's apartment. Set up automatic payments. Tell Henry. Give her the key. Hide the copy of the deed where she'll find it. Spray the coat with lavender. Say, "How's the apartment?" one last time. I closed the book. I placed it gently on the table. Then I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the second key, the one from 2B. I held it in my palm, and I whispered, "I'm not letting go." Not because I was afraid. Not because I was angry. Not because I was still waiting for her to say she was sorry. But because I finally understood. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about justice. It wasn't even about the apartment. It was about remembering. About honoring. About choosing, every day, to live in the truth he left behind. Not as a victim. Not as a fighter. But as a woman who had been loved, deeply, quietly, fiercely, and who had learned at last how to receive it. I walked to the window. I opened it wider. The breeze came in. And for the first time since I was a child, I didn't feel the need to be loud to be heard. I didn't feel the need to be strong to be safe. I didn't feel the need to be perfect to be worthy. I just felt here, and that was enough. I turned off the light. I didn't lock the door. I didn't need to. I lay down on the floor, wrapped in his coat, and I looked up at the ceiling, at the cracks, at the shadows, at the way the moonlight fell like honey across the wood. And I thought, he didn't leave me money. He didn't leave me power. He didn't leave me a house to show off. He left me a place to breathe, a place to be tired, a place to be silent, a place to be whole. And now, I was living in it, not as a triumph, not as a trophy, but as a quiet, sacred act of faith. In him, in myself, in the truth that love doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it just leaves a key and waits for you to open the door. I closed my eyes, and I whispered, "I'm here, Papa." And for the first time, I didn't say it to the past. I said it to the future. I said it to the life I was choosing, to the woman I was becoming, to the peace I had earned, not by fighting but by staying, by listening, by holding on, by letting go. I didn't need to post this. I didn't need to tell the world. I didn't need to prove I had won, because I already knew. I had. Not in the courtroom, not in the headlines, not in the comments, but here, in this quiet, in this breath, in this moment. The motif had become my life. The coat, the key, the note, the list, the receipt, the bank, the gathering, the letter, the reversal, the geranium, the leaf, the photographs, the quiet, and now, the choice, to keep living in it, to keep breathing in it, to keep being the woman he believed I was. Not the one the world told me to be, not the one they tried to erase, but the one he saw, the one he saved, the one he gave the key to. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just breathed. And I smiled. Not because I was happy. Not because I was healed. But because I was free. Free from the need to explain. Free from the need to prove. Free from the need to be forgiven. Free to simply be. I rolled onto my side. I pressed the key to my chest. And I whispered one last time, "I'm home." And I slept. Not because I was tired, but because I was safe. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have to earn it. I just had to remember. And I did. I remembered him. I remembered myself. And I remembered. Love doesn't always come with a ceremony. Sometimes, it comes with a key, and a quiet question, and a coat that still smells like lavender, and a geranium that blooms when no one is watching, and a woman who finally learned. She was always enough. I didn't end this story with a victory. I ended it with a whisper. Because that's how he loved. That's how I learned to love. And that's how I will live. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Not for the camera. But quietly. And completely. And true. I didn't need to say it again. I just needed to live it. And so I did. The video never posted. But the truth did. And that was the only ending he ever wanted for me. If you've ever been told your pain is too quiet to matter asterisk. If you've ever been made to feel like your love wasn't loud enough to be real asterisk. If you've ever carried a key you didn't know how to use asterisk. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not too little. You are the quiet miracle someone fought to give you. And you deserve to live in it. Meyer asterisk. If this story found you when you needed it, I'm so glad. I don't know your name, I don't know your pain, but I see you, and I'm here with you in the quiet. If you're ready to speak, whether in a journal to a friend or to the mirror, I hope you do. You don't need permission. You just need to remember you were always worthy. And if you're not ready yet, that's okay too. Just breathe. The key is still in your hand. The coat still smells like lavender. And the apartment, it's still waiting for you to come home.